Holy Spirit. Christ is born. Oh, very good. As most of you probably know, in the Orthodox Church, when we celebrate the Feast of Epiphany or Theophany, it is not for us the day that we celebrate the wise men. I mean, Epiphany means a manifestation, and the Theophany is a sort of manifestation of God. And the idea being that this was the revelation of the incarnate Christ to the Gentiles. Now, in the Orthodox Church, we actually celebrate that today, even though it's clear from the gospel narrative that the wise men were not present at Jesus' birth. And as you see in the icon, you see the wise men as little figures kind of far off. And it's not that Byzantine artists didn't understand the concept of perspective. And the Greeks had invented that a long time before. But that's another whole subject. The point is that it's all part of the Christmas Theophany narrative, the wise men. And in thinking about these wise men, it's interesting that it said that Herod and all Jerusalem was sort of in a flurry about what this meant. So it was a small world, this world, the Jewish world, the world of Jerusalem, and this was kind of a big thing. These were people that had come from many hundreds of miles to take this long journey because in their study of prophecy and of the sky, they knew that something was going on, even though the people that should have been waiting in grateful anticipation were actually fearful when they heard that this Messiah was to be born. So this is the first hint we have that Christ was coming not just for the Jewish people, but to save the whole world. There's very little description. The Bible is very terse with its words. So the many traditions have come up around the wise men, and we typically see them as being of three different races, and as representing three different continents, and this is actually, it's good symbolism. We don't know, but the idea is certainly a good one. That this is the idea that Christ came for all races and all men. And we know Jerusalem, they talk about Jerusalem being the center of the world. And geographically, at least of the old world, it is right there in between Europe, Asia, and Africa, and it is sort of the meeting place of the whole civilized world, or was. All of this is to suggest that all of humanity was going to be included in this great miracle of transformation. And the only people who actually realized this fully and showed up were the very simple, the shepherds who were not particularly educated, but who apparently were pious and were open to following and being obedient to the Spirit. And the wise men who represented all the great wisdom of the ancient world. And sometimes they're called astrologers, which they most likely were. If you can imagine before TV and movies and radio and when it got dark at night, most people just went to bed. It was dark, except for that glorious starry sky. And people like the shepherds, people like the wise men, spent a lot of time just observing the movements of the heavens and how they correlated with things that were going on in earth. Now, we say in the Christmas Troparia that by it those who worship the stars were taught by the stars to adore thee. So there's something that we miss because we don't live in that kind of culture, but in the ancient world, and even today, in much of the Eastern world, there's a very fatalistic outlook on life, that things are foreordained, that things are in the stars, and you can't do much about it. And this is reflected in many societies where, whatever you are born in, this is pretty much where you're going to stay, because it is your fate, it is your karma, it is in the stars. And this is something that we take for granted, but didn't exist and still doesn't exist in much of the world. And that is this idea of freedom. That we are not bound by nature. We are not in our spirit, not in our souls. We are not bound by the stars. We're not bound by our genes. We are free through the liberation given by Jesus Christ, and there is no stronger force than His grace and our free will. Unfortunately, we often use our free will to resist His grace, which is indeed incredibly perverse. That we should think that freedom is following our own lights, our emotions, our passions, and the brain cells talking to each other. The freedom, the first and only freedom we have had since the fall of Adam and Eve was the incarnation of Christ. So those who were the wisest in the old world, that really understood a lot about how things worked, learned to not see that fate or the gods as the strongest force in the universe, but to worship He who created all those things. And we don't realize how fortunate we are until you actually go to a country where that is the prevailing religion and philosophy, and where terrible things happen and are accepted in the name of, there's not much you can do about it, this is fate. So, and this is why, as our friend Father Paul used to say, even the worst Christian won't walk by somebody bleeding in the street. It's just in us. But if we believe it's His fate, then we walk by, and we're just glad, thank you that, I'm not like that. So, there's so many things. We are so blessed by the fruits of the grace of Christianity, and we are on the verge of throwing it all away. Not us, hopefully, but let us treasure it, proclaim it, live it, and share it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.